Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our City Council workshop meeting for January 10th. And I apologize, my agenda is not loading. Thank you for that. Okay, and so with that, oh, there you are. If you would please call roll call.
Yes. Councilmember Campos.
Present.
Milne.
Here.
Roach.
Present.
Serrano.
Here.
Torres.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney.
Here.
And Mayor Barajas.
Present.
Great.
And with that, if you would stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And again, I'm trying to get access to the agenda here. So first item on the agenda, the City of Pasco workshop meeting is being broadcast live on PSC-TV, channel 191 on Charter Spectrum Cable in Pasco and Richland, and streamed at www.pasco-wa.gov/PSC-TV live and on City's Facebook page at www.facebook.com/City of Pasco. And there's also instructions to join via phone. Call in at area code 631-992-3211. Use access code 613-585-088. And with that, we call this meeting to order. Item number 4, are there any verbal reports from any of our council members? Go ahead, Councilmember Mill.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. This last week I did have the honor of representing Pasco. They had a elected officials reception at the Reach, and it was a pretty good turnout. So got to represent there, and then also I had a Parks and Rec board last week. And I will say I was pretty impressed. The city gave out 600 packages for the new year, and it had little things to make noises and some other cool stuff. And so I thought it was pretty good. And some of the other things we went over, we'll be actually going over on 5A, so I won't spoil any news there, but good meeting, and it's good to be here in Pasco.
Thank you for sharing that. Any other council members have any reports? Councilwoman Torres?
Yes, I do. It was an honor to be at the Friday's ribbon cutting for the Girl Scouts office. They have a new location on Burden Boulevard in Pasco. I'm so excited that they chose Pasco to have their new office. And you should go check it out. It's a beautiful little store. They have items for sale there. The cookies won't be selling until I think February, I believe is what they said. And they have a new cookie, so look for that.
And I do apologize. I have a basket to share with you all that I left in the car. So if you want cookies, meet me at the car afterwards. All right. Any other reports from our council members? None. And with that, we move to item 5. Item A, presentation from Park and Recreation Master Plan, Director Ratkai.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and members of Council. Zach Ratkai, Administrative and Community Services Director. As Council is aware, we are in the midst of working with our consultant, MIG Consulting out of Portland, to develop a complete overhaul of our Parks and Recreation Master Plan. And really our goals for this is to create a plan that's in line with the city's exponential growth that we are seeing currently, as well as in the forthcoming years. Really to identify community needs, gaps, and priorities, where we can fill now or what we need to anticipate for the future. And obviously to stay in compliance with state requirements and remain eligible for future RCO grant funding. And we've been the beneficiary of a number of RCO grants, and we want to keep reaping those awards in the coming years. And really our vision for this entire plan is really to have Pasco being known for the best parks, recreation, and open space system in the Tri-Cities. So we're still working on the timeline. Timeline for this project should be completed by May 31st, 2022. And we wanted to have a very engaging stakeholder engagement and community engagement process, as well as consistent council reporting. So tonight is the second of 3 planned city council updates to this. And we have Cindy Mendoza from MIG here with us this evening to present on behalf of the plan. Cindy, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be here. I am here to give you a quick status report and update on the Park System Master Plan. I will go ahead and share my screen. And is that coming up then for you all? Perfect. All right. As part of this update, we wanted to let me cross-check. For some reason, this is a new format for screen sharing, and
Ms.
these
Mendoza,
slides are not
Cindy,
advancing.
we should have it on the screen, and we do have someone operating the PowerPoint at the City Council chambers.
Perfect. That sounds great. Then go ahead and advance to the next slide, please. As we just mentioned, we're here to deliver a plan that not only reviews and updates your existing conditions and inventory, but documents community needs and priorities to identify community-supported vision and goals for the future of your park recreation and open space system. And what that leads us to are clear recommendations and directions for implementation for the future, whether that is enhancing your existing parks or providing new parks and facilities to respond to the tremendous amount of growth that you are anticipating. Next slide, please. If you recall, I was here last in late June to be able to give you an update on phase 1, which was the system assessment, where we were in process at that time of updating your inventory and creating the base maps for this project. It also kicked us off with a series of outreach steps to help identify community needs and opportunities, as well as your vision for the future. And that's where we are today, in the midst of summarizing these outreach findings to date, as well as completing a technical analysis of community needs that will tell us more about park access, as well as needed facilities and amenities throughout your park system. That'll set the stage for phase 3, where we are looking to identify more specifically goal-driven recommendations and a capital improvement plan for your park system, which will then translate into the development of the plan to guide implementation and to position yourselves for grants over the next several years. Next slide, please. As shown here, we've documented on a base map your entire park and recreation system, which includes 41 parks and over 626 acres. What's important to recognize is in this large park system, the school district, with sites shown in purple, as well as the Port Army Corps, play an important part of providing park and recreation services. Because in addition to the city's acreage, the city is also surrounded by more than 1,800 acres of additional parks and open space provided by others. Next slide. Part of the initial documentation that we created was not only around your physical assets, but also about the program services and even funding and resources that you have in your park system. Popular events and programs such as sports and large events contribute to your economic vibrancy and also celebrate the city's diversity. What's shown here is a quick overview of participation rates Recognizing that COVID has affected participation in community activities, it takes an annual average of participation for several key facilities or key activities from the years 2016 to 21. Next slide. As we move into identifying key community needs, if you go ahead and advance, you will see that we've started with a demographic overview. As we discussed with you last time, this is a community of rapid growth, 33% more than 19,000 residents over the last 10 years, which is anticipated to continue to grow at a rapid pace. But what's important to recognize is that it's not demographically even, in the sense that most of your residents are actually younger and many are Hispanic and Latino. As shown on the graphs here, there are 54% of residents under the age 18 and 55% Hispanic and Latino residents that make this a majority of your system, and also recognizes that you have very unique needs to be met across the different demographics. Next slide. What's important to recognize also is not just the demographics are different, but the places in which people reside are obviously distinct as well. So we've begun mapping equity and accessibility to start to identify whether all residents and all groups in the community have equitable access to parks and recreation facilities. So while much of the city's new development and growth is in West Pasco and north of the UGA, most of the ethnically diverse areas are in the central and east Pasco areas, as shown on these maps here. So we want to pay special attention to make sure that park deficient areas such as the central city are also meeting needs, as well as responding to the new development on the west side. Next slide. So to date, we've undertaken a variety of outreach activities, which includes meeting with the Parks Board, the Advisory Committee, and even key stakeholders such as Franklin County and the Tri-Cities Hispanic Chamber to start to understand distinct needs. And while we see some differences in terms of the feedback we're receiving, we've also been hearing very consistent themes, some of which are highlighted in the wall graphic that you see here. These include things such as the importance of partnerships and even finding that right balance between needs between the established neighborhoods, the central city, for example, and even the new growth areas on the west side. Next slide. We wanted to share some preliminary findings from a community survey that was undertaken, which received tremendous feedback. It was offered in both English and Spanish. It had 922 total responses, so it's a very strong participation rate in this type of survey. 26% of the residents who responded identified as Hispanic and Latino, which isn't quite as many as we'd hoped, but at the same time was a very strong representation of diverse community needs. Also looking at the needs of younger children, 71% of respondents indicated that they have children under the age of 18 at home, and we did receive responses from all areas of the city. Looking at the next slide, we're going to highlight just a couple of critical findings for you. The first one is really around the things that are missing or most needed in your park system. And here, participants were allowed to choose up to 3 responses, which accounts for the percentages that you see there. And what was interesting is that the things that were most needed, which really are consistent with the younger community, are what we call extraordinary play features. So it's not just your traditional play equipment, but also nature play, water play, or destination play elements. And right behind that in terms of percentages were challenge elements, which you often see desired by older teens and even young adults, things such as climbing walls, bike skill courses, and zip lines. Not surprising, there was also a strong response for better river access. And then what you see, the fourth one that emerged was actually a write-in opportunity to write in other elements. And what we saw here were many comments around desires for a skate park, sports complexes and sports fields, even restrooms in parks and shade. So improving active recreation as well as comfort and use of parks. And behind that were trails connecting the park system, followed by specifically callouts of sports fields for the park system. But then if we flip to the next slide, we saw a slightly different breakdown when we ask about funding priorities. We like to ask this question to make sure that we understand where funds should be invested. And here, by far, the top funding priority was around the new aquatics facility that has been proposed here for the community. And why that's so interesting is that through the pandemic, across many cities, people have sort of stepped back and shied away a little bit from the bigger investments. And we often see the top response is the number 2 one here, which is repairing and replacing older and worn park features, or adding a greater variety of features in parks, which appeared number 3rd. So this is really significant that the top response was around that aquatics facility. And as you see, there is this sense of needing to take care of your existing assets and adding to those before adding or building new parks. So it definitely showcases that need to have a balance in the system. Next slide. What this leads to is we start to combine our outreach findings with our technical analysis. It's the identification of some key opportunities. These have been looked at in detail, but we want to just give you a few highlights at this point as we continue with this analysis. One is definitely strengthening the identity of neighborhoods. So responding to the characteristics and needs of nearby neighbors in all parks. And then I think we've alluded to this a couple of times already in this presentation, looking at the central city, downtown Pasco, and seeing how parks can catalyze reinvestment there. And then focusing on land protection and new growth areas, but as well as the provision of parks and recreation opportunities in those same new growth areas. Looking at connectivity to improve community walkability, park access, and active transportation. And then even addressing the need of aging facilities and existing parks, as well as making ADA improvements. Those are some of the opportunities that we'll continue to look into as we move to the next slide. As we begin our next steps in the park system analysis, which is, again, continuing with outreach through next steps to make sure we are hearing diverse voices and really capturing community priorities and helping prioritize recommendations, but then also in developing a capital improvement plan as well as guidance for programs and services moving forward. So with that, you can advance to the next slide, and that really concludes our overview of the existing system status report and key needs that we've identified to date. We would love any directions and or comments and questions you have at this point to continue to guide this update. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mendoza, for your presentation. I'd like to open it to our council if you have any questions or comments, any discussion. Go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem Maloney.
Thank you, Mayor Barajas, and thank you for the presentation. You know, this is going to be really key, I think, for how we're setting ourselves up for the future. So I'm really looking forward to getting into more of the details. But one of the questions I have is, are there any long-term or long lead time actions that need to be taken by the city prior to the finalization of this plan to keep us on track for where we are likely going? That could be land purchases or other sort of capital investments, or more, you know, putting aside a certain fund, or what actions do we as a council need to take before this is finalized?
Before the plan is finalized, there's nothing at this point other than recognizing that we need to start to think about the long-term funding. When you are balancing new growth, we're obviously going to need to invest in new parks. The critical thing is going to be looking at your impact fees to ensure that new growth helps offset the costs of new growth. That will be part of this. We also want to make sure that we're looking at the fact that impact fees do not cover the cost of the existing system improvements that are needed here. So we'll need to address not only impact fees, but other funding sources that really will support infrastructure improvements, and then even beyond that, the programs, events, and services, including maintenance, that are desired by the community. So it's really a robust funding package that we're going to put you in position for, as well as getting in position for grant funding. Certainly the analysis and the project list will help you identify how much funding and what types of funding are needed. But I think the critical thing is to be aware those shifts in conversations will be happening.
Great. And the other question I had was, we've heard from a number of concerned residents and citizens in the area that they're very concerned about making sure that we have adequate waterfront access. Is there any initial information on that, or is that going to be coming later in terms of more specific sort of land and areas of opportunity?
It's part of the mapping analysis that's being conducted now to look at gaps in service, not only for neighborhood parks, but also those opportunity areas such as connections to the waterfront that are going to be so critical. So those mapping pieces will be coming forward next and used to inform that capital plan.
Great, thank you very much.
Any other comments or concerns from our council members? If not, we move forward with...
Mayor, I have just one, and that is to echo the concerns of residents that the western side of Pasco and the northwestern side of Pasco do not have adequate waterfront access, or just parks for that matter. If you look at west of Road 68 on the, I believe it's the third slide of the PowerPoint, there's Island Park, Vintage Park, Liberty Park, and then Chiawana along the riverfront. And so for that area, and that's our identified area of growth and new residents, definitely interested in seeing staff's presentation of acquisition of riverfront access, connectivity for bike paths, as well as more neighborhood parks in that corridor. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councilwoman Roach.
Mayor.
Go ahead, Councilmember Serrano.
Thank you. This is a staff question, probably for Mr. Rekai. As we've heard, obviously a big concern is making sure A, we procure land, but B, specifically, we procure riverfront, trail access, etc. What are we doing to ensure we have adequate funding? And as we look at some of the impact fees, how will that offset those costs? And are we also considering whether or not through some of these master development plans, not just the park and recs area, but kind of these sub-city like the Road 100 kind of planning, that we're ensuring that we look at potential land offsets? That is, rather than requiring a specific impact fee, maybe we might get a developer or landowner to provide green space access. I know that's a lot to take into in one question, but can you kind of highlight that? And if we are lacking in a specific area, can you please provide so we can help set the proper direction? Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Councilmember Serrano. And I believe that what we have now is we have the Park Development Fund, and that is where our impact fees get placed into. We have 3 sections of that fund. Each of that has a positive fund balance, and we've drawn from that fund previously to develop or redevelop certain areas of the parks. We do have funding in place to find new land specifically slated for the northwest area of Pasco. And what we really wanted to do, and I think part of the reason we're doing a large-scale overhaul of the Parks and Rec Master Plan, is to get some of that ideas of just saying we know that our funding could be short, potentially to meet the growth need, but we call it what I call unconscious incompetence, is we just didn't know what we didn't know at the time, and or even now. So that's part of the reason why we partner with MIG and do a full robust redo of our Parks and Rec master plan to determine, okay, you have the funding that you have now, but we're going to identify over the next couple of months what additional funding will be, what those rates would be for impact fees that we would potentially have to take back to council, and then address that at budget time to say, you know, the money we have in for a community park in the northwest part of Pasco, is that going to be enough for the acreage that we need to serve a community need there? And I think you raise a great point. Dedication of land, dedication of trail corridors in lieu of park impact fees or offsets are all something that have been successful around the country to provide the civic use of parks, and certainly something we're going to be looking to incorporate into the findings and overall recommendations for this plan. And I really don't like to have master plans for the department that sit on the shelf, and really we are looking at this for guidance for staff to see what we can implement, whether it's through codified ordinances, policies, and practices of the department, but what we can implement to actually serve the future and reach that vision of the best parks in Tri-Cities. So we're looking at the funding. We have funding set aside. We're looking at it. Is it enough? What we need to do to bring it about in the future, where we need to put those parks, and what are some alternatives to have development help pay its way, have growth sort of help grow the park in order to serve its own needs. So it's kind of a jumbled up answer there, but I hope I covered it, and I can take any follow-ups.
No, you covered it well, and I'll say I appreciate having Mr. Gonzalez right in front of me, because I saw him nodding his head as you discussed the trade-off component. So, you know, it's good to hear that, you know, our planning team is also kind of wanting or seemingly to want to lockstep. I won't put words on his head bobble, but I'm sure, again, I appreciate that. And so I think it's good that hopefully we're on the same track together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Milne, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. And I also do appreciate Mr. Radke answering the question. I was somewhat going along the lines with Serrano, only I think he said it a little better than I would. And I just also wanted to echo Roach and Maloney's comments. I mean, this is how our council will be defined if we do a good park and, again, just doing it right. So very it's on my mind as far as making sure that it's done right. So I just want to echo their concerns as well. So thank you.
Thank you for that. So definitely something we are all looking at and looking forward to improving and implementing in our area. So we move over to item B, the Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity Commission Progress Report. And we have Ms. Angela.
Hi, good evening, Mayor and Council. And I am just going to do a brief introduction of Jeffrey Robinson, the chairperson for the Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity Commission. A brief history of the commission is listed in your packet, but I'm going to turn it over to Jeffrey.
You know, I half expect there to be theme music whenever I come up to this thing. The other day I had a dream it was the theme from Jaws. Alrighty then, now that we've got that icebreaker out of the way and I've relieved the two newer council members, because there's no way you're going to look worse than that, trust me. Give me time. For those few of you who don't know me, my name is Jeffrey Aaron Robinson, and I am indeed your Idec chair, infamous, loved, probably more infamous, but here I am today. I'm going to give you a presentation that's going to be fun. All right, let's get started, shall we? All right, now what will we cover? Any good lecture begins with a roadmap, don't you know? So we're going to cover some core concepts to consider. We're going to cover goals from the Idec work plan and actions taken. We're going to cover recommendations that we are submitting to you as the council because, and I'm going to repeat this so often you will get sick of it, but it's important that the public understand this. You're the boss. I work for you. You have the power and you get to decide what happens. And remember that because it's important. And then finally, we're going to go to questions from council members. And I'm not going to lie, I am trying really hard not to get emotional since this will be my last address. So I hope that the mayor, Madam Mayor, will permit me at the very end to say goodbye to you all. But beyond that, let's get started, shall we? Core concepts. So one of the things I want to bring to your attention, let's get this away so someone still has eardrums when I'm done.
One of the core concepts I want to bring to your attention is the listening sessions and community engagement. It was a key component of our work. It was intended to be held on a quarterly basis and rotated through each city council district. Unfortunately, what happened, you might be asking? COVID happened, and a bunch of really intricate, really interesting, really controversial safety measures happened that made it difficult for us to hold in-person meetings, especially because you can get complaints for that sort of thing. So we attempted to do our best here. We had one in-person meeting before COVID started, and then we had a virtual one. We figured out how to do virtual, and there's a lot of work involved in that, but now we know how to do those things. So should you renew this commission, other versions of this commission will be able to take advantage so we can keep going. And for the record, I know there's at least one council member who wanted us to do a diversity festival and a winter festival sort of thing. I thought that was a brilliant idea. COVID killed it. We care, though, don't worry. We care. COVID killed your good idea. All right, moving on with core concepts. The Idec work plan, who gosh and golly. One of the biggest things you need to understand about the work plan, folks, is that it was designed to be transparent. Look, we've all seen commissions or examples of government run amok where it says it's going to do something, or it tells you, oh, I can solve a problem here, I can solve a problem there, but it doesn't. We geared ours to be transparent so that not only the council members that I see staring back at me now with horrified fascination, but the public could watch what we were doing so that you would never have to ask a question about the validity of our work. So transparency to the community of our purpose and our plan. It was designed to be adaptable to meet any challenges. And let me tell you, when COVID hit, God, I was sure thankful for that fact. A presentation was given to the City Council exploring the plan in depth and soliciting their feedback. Now, there was technically 2 presentations you've had from us. The first was by yours truly, and I just enjoyed every minute of it, let me tell you. And the second was by my extraordinary Vice Chair, Naima Chambers-Smith. And I do want to say something. There's a long history in this country of women of color and non-binary people, especially when they bust their butts on something and really put the heart and soul into a project, not getting the recognition that they deserve. And I do want to highlight Naima Chambers-Smith, the Vice Chair of this commission, Eloise Sparks, a commissioner, Carly Coburn, a fellow commissioner, our staff member, Angela Pashon, and Lynn Carlson, our facilitator. They worked themselves half to death, not only on this presentation, but in the course of all of our work. And I will tell you, without these extraordinary people, we never would have gotten here. And by the way, for those who are wondering, the mayor that you see before you was also instrumental in helping us to even get a commission, and I don't feel that she gets the credit that she deserves for that. So I will say on the record, yes, Madam Mayor, you did actually bust your butt too on this one. Yes, it's now in the record, and yes, the chair did just call you out for it. Isn't that lovely? Okay, so it was the plan was approved by the commission in January 2021. Yeah, who's building to some excitement here? All right, and here we go. See, that was just the warm-up. That was to get you started. It gets more fun. All right, so let's talk about the goals from the Idec work plan and the actions that we took. So goal number 1 that I want to highlight for you, or I should say goal 1C, support and promote diverse cultural heritage events in Pasco. The action that we took for this one is that we have been working on a diverse calendar. It is in development, and it's supposed to be turned into you by the end of the month if you haven't gotten it already. It's supposed to be as wide a net as we could draw. It's supposed to have a lot of stuff in there because we want to make sure when we talk about issues of diversity that we're properly informing you and that you have a resource befitting the dignity of this city and this city council and the faith that you have placed in us. So we are working on that. It will be into you at the end of the month. The next goal that I want to highlight to you, and I'm trying to lower my voice because this microphone, I don't want to blow out some eardrums here. The next goal I would like to highlight for you is goal 2A, which was hold inclusion, diversity, and equity meetings in the community on a quarterly basis, as well as improve engagement with the city. As I told you earlier, this is something I know I joined the commission specifically because this was something that I was passionate about. I really wanted us to be able to do this because I think that each specific city council district in our city has a story to tell. unique challenges that the marginalized communities and that the community at large in each of those districts has, and a special voice we must never, ever lose. COVID, unfortunately, kind of fell down like a hammer and it shattered our plan and we had to improvise, but we did improvise because we care. This is important, we do care. All right, I see nods of approval. This, by the way, is a flyer for our most recent event, and we're actually going to go into our most recent event and actually talk about what was asked so you get a feel for the kind of work that we have been trying to do. I would like to credit Naima Chambers-Smith especially because this is an example of her going above and beyond because she worked mercilessly and was really tough on herself to help us get a general design going, and she was very, very helpful at the meetings especially. So really, this is an example of something she contributed we would not have without her. And city staff also worked really hard to translate this into a Spanish flyer because if we're going to talk about inclusion and equity and diversity, that means everybody gets a seat at the table. Everybody, or we don't have a table. All right, seeing more nods, I will move on. Let's talk about the questions, of which there were a few. The first question that we asked the members of the community who showed up at our most recent event was as follows. As a resident of Pasco, what do you feel the biggest barriers are to participating in your city government, assessing city services, or to life in general here in Pasco? And we got quite a few answers to that, actually. The first one that we got was that we need to encourage people to download the new Ask Pasco app and get the word out about Pasco Pulse. And this is another theme that's going to come up. The general feeling in the community is that you are actually trying. You are working towards something. You're building up. There's a level of trust towards and affection towards this city government and especially this city council that I don't think I've ever seen. In 34 years of life, I've never, in any place I've ever lived, read about, or been anywhere near, I have never seen the level of genuine affection and trust in the community towards this city council. It goes beyond politics. It goes beyond anything one could expect. And in these times where we become more cynical, that is something to treasure. So when they're making suggestions, they're not saying you have failed. They're saying they want to help you get even better. And that's a very special thing to note as we go further into this. So encourage people to download the new Ask Pasco app, which is amazing, and get the word out via Pasco Pulse. That was one thing we got. Let residents know what is going on via email, mail, and various ways. Look, the city is constantly trying to improve how it communicates with the public. Let's not pretend that we aren't all thinking the same thing. How can we do it better? That is the core nature of being a public servant. We always want to do better. And so the community, the way I took that comment and my colleagues took that comment was as encouragement. Because if you notice, we do have a social media presence. We need to do a little better, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But we do have one that's far ahead of a lot of other municipalities in our area. So how can we make it better? What other avenues can we communicate with the citizenry? And that's basically what they're asking us. In addition to what we know, what about the methods we don't know that we're trying, or that we could try to better connect? And so that's one thing to take note of. Another person brought up the idea of utilizing social media platforms such as Instagram. Now, I'm going to tell you, I'm probably the only millennial in the world who doesn't know how to use Instagram, has never been on TikTok, thinks they might be witchcraft, and not the fun kind that you see in a supernatural thriller, the weird kind that makes no sense. But apparently, especially in a young city like ours, since we have a majority of young people, this is something that the community would like us to do a little bit more on. They would like us to use things like Instagram to really highlight who we are. You as the city council must never forget that just as your districts have a story to tell, you collectively as a government entity have a lot of stories to tell, and we're going to get into that in a little bit too. Now, here's one that a community member brought up, and since the concept of Wi-Fi has been invented, I've seen every single public official in Franklin County and Benton County do the same thing whenever this is brought up. Are you ready? This is very important. I'm going to mime this. You know, smack themselves on the forehead because Wi-Fi is like this unknowable riddle that none of us can solve. I don't know what a router does. I look at it, it blinks, I get internet. But the community wants better access to Wi-Fi. What is the point of live streaming a city council meeting for all to see if they can't actually see it? And this is something that the citizenry of Pasco is very adamant about. They want better receptivity, not just to Wi-Fi, but if you've ever tried to use your cell phone, certain brands of cell phone do not work here. And it can be very inhibiting. It's not just some luxury item. It really is. For a lot of people, that's what they have. And if they can't use it, then they can't connect with us. And if they can't connect with us, how are they supposed to trust us? How are they supposed to participate? How are they supposed to know what we're doing? So that's another one. And this one, I thought this was a magical comment, and I'm not going to lie, I'm trying not to giggle, but use humor to be more relatable. An example of this in my mind is, you know, I love the Pasco Police Department. I don't know if any of you have ever looked at their Facebook, but one of the most hilarious things I have ever seen is when the Pasco Police Department put a missed connections ad on their Facebook to catch a speeder. And I read that and I thought to myself, I don't know whether I should be impressed or fearful that they've gone to dating apps to catch you now, because boy, there's some bad ones out there. But, you know, I think the way I interpreted that comment was they kind of want a little bit more humanity, because the thing is, it is so easy, and it gets easier every single day with a public official to misunderstand who they really are, to assume because they did one thing you didn't like that they're suddenly a bad person and they've always been a bad person and they're not really human at all. But when you do things like I'm attempting to do with this speech, you'll have to tell me afterward if I was successful. When you use humor, when you show your humanity, when you're honest about your flaws, when you take the time to admit you don't have all the answers, when you just let people see who you really are, oftentimes they will find that that is something they can trust. They will find that that is something that they can relate to because, boy, they've been there too. Bad day at the job, feeling like you're not respected. They've been there. They know what that's like. So when you're up at the dais or you're out and about or you're doing your thing, don't forget that the most critical reason each of you was selected for your jobs is because of the humanity you bring to the positions that you inhabit. That is something we can all connect on. So those were what the community said to us when we asked them this question. And don't worry, we're going to get deeper. It's going to get more exciting. Now, this is another one of those exciting questions that we all ask. I think every commission that you've ever established has asked this question, which is how can the city improve community engagement? We thought about this and we thought, why not go to the source and ask the source? Why not ask the people? How can we do better? And this is what they told us. The first thing they said to us was that we should improve how people see the city of Pasco as an incubator of resources, connecting people to legal, housing, supporting those who are unsheltered, you know, kind of like a one-stop shop, and really highlighting the resources that people care about. Now, I can't remember her official title, but she was actually at our last event, and the city is making a stride on it. This is an example of how you have something to tell us, but you haven't told us fully yet, or you haven't figured out how to get the message across a busy city waiting room where there's all this noise drowning you out. You actually already did this. You hired a resource officer. She was at our last event. She was extraordinary. She gave a masterful speech explaining who she was. And I got to tell you, I walked out of that meeting after hearing her speak thinking, good Lord, they are better at staffing than 90% of the places I've ever worked. You know, never join any club that's willing to hire you as a member. But anyway, you know, so the city is doing something like that, but the people don't understand, by and large, that you're doing this. They don't understand that you're already listening, and we've got to work on that. So that was something that came up. The second, continue hosting spaces for the community to be heard and listened to. You know, that is so much harder in COVID, and I understand that. And I think the community does too. And there are some on the council that are trying very hard to, you know, adapt to these changes. And there are some that are trying to fight against what they feel to be unjustified regulations that prohibit us from doing this. Everybody has an answer to the challenge of our time, But the one thing that is abundantly clear is, regardless of what your answer is, we all seem to agree on one core concept. We just want to talk to each other. We just want to be able to have that safe space, be it on a Zoom or when this pandemic is sufficiently conquered. And make no mistake, no matter what you hear, we will kick this thing's ass. It'll be the only time you ever hear me use the ASS word at one of these. But we are going to get through this, and by God, we're going to come out stronger. Do not let anybody tell you different. It is wrong. We will get through this. We all agree that we are a family. We all agree that we are a community, and we all agree that with or without this virus, we get nowhere unless we go together and we talk to each other and together. And that is what the public is telling us. They want us to figure it out and to figure out a format that we can come together. The next thing, continue to utilize the community engagement manager. You, as I said before, have a story to tell us, don't you? You're a city council that saw a new era dawning, and you decided you were going to take it head on. You created an Idec commission because you knew work needed to be done, and we'll touch on that later. You've empowered your staff to think of innovative solutions. You have one of the best city managers I've ever seen, and he's doing a damn fine job, and you have a city staff that are devoted to the people. The reality is this is the city that's going to come up with the answer to a lot of different questions we are vexed with. That's another one where, let me leave you in no doubt, you will come up with a solution because that's who you are, and we all know that. The fact of the matter is the people want us to continue utilizing the methods we've discovered and to build upon them to find methods we haven't discovered yet. And we're well on our way. The next thing, and we saw how beneficial that can be in the last presentation before mine, is use the city surveys. You know, everybody craps on surveys, but the reality is from that one survey that you saw in the previous presentation, we learned a whole heck of a lot about our community, didn't we? Surveys have a way of, if people are scared to come up to a dais like this one and talk directly to power, where they can voice their opinion freely without fear of whatever it is that stops them from being able to fully plug into the process. It gives them an out. It gives them a chance to really talk to us when we have these surveys. And they are a great tool, and you are using them effectively, but the people are telling us that these surveys matter. Ask Pasco, it matters. The Pasco Pulse, it matters. The way that was brought up at our meeting, I saw that as a North Star comment. We're heading in the right direction. Yes, we can make it better, but the reality is people like the surveys, and we are getting somewhere with them. All right, I see nods, so I'm going to get off that high horse and get on to another one. All right. The next question that we asked is, again, another one of those where we wanted to take it to the source. You've asked me this privately numerous times. Some of you even asked me this publicly. Do you feel that our city is transparent when sharing information with our community? Why? How can our city improve? So we asked that question to the people. What did they want? And this is what they told us. It starts with code enforcement. And, you know, gosh, any conversation about local government, it's a noun, a verb, and code enforcement. You know, because this is something that impacts people in their daily lives. You may not know what the codes are, but you will deal with the codes. This is something, again, you cannot escape. So this is what people told us when they brought up code enforcement, which was the number one issue. They don't understand what they are and what they aren't allowed to do. Like, for example, the Tri-City Herald not so long ago published a rather interesting story that had to do with one of the murals that we asked a member of the community to paint. And I don't really want to get into it because that's not really what was of interest to me. What was of interest to me was that a lot of people don't really understand what they're allowed to do around a mural or around city art or in a city park. They want to follow the rules. They just don't know what the rules are. They don't know how to find the rules. And for those that could get on our city website, they were taken to this weird rinky-dink little thing that I have to be honest with you, I am like one of the nerdiest people alive, and I'm okay with this. I own this. I could barely make sense of the damn thing. I mean, I was trying to look up, you know, that breed-specific law you folks repealed some time ago and figure out what the new one was, and I couldn't find it. And I'm the guy that goes through this for fun. This is a Saturday evening, God help me, and I still couldn't figure it out. So people don't really get that. They also don't understand, and this is a valid criticism, you know, that people in our community have. They don't understand how they're supposed to interact in a restaurant. And what I mean by this is, look, I'm wearing a mask at this podium right now. We're in a situation where we have a pandemic that changes. People don't understand, you know, where the business owner and their control over that space begins and ends and where the city does. They don't understand when, for example, can you take your mask off? Is it when you're sitting at the table? Do you automatically have to put it on when you go to the bathroom? Are you somehow supposed to magically use a Jedi mind trick to convince yourself that you've eaten by staring at the food while keeping the mask on all the time? A lot of people sincerely do not understand, and they get frustrated because they don't know what they're supposed to do and how they're supposed to interact. And it shouldn't really be the city's job in a lot of ways to express this and to explain this, but since you're the ones who have to implement a lot of these policies, it does end up falling on us as a city. We're the place they're going to go to that they trust to get their information. And we have an obligation to do that correctly, so that was something they brought up. You know, they also were confused. Like, let's say that you want to open a new business in Pasco. Like, there's some sort of business now where you can throw an axe at something. I've seen this, you know, and I've never been in one, but I'm thinking about going there, you know, at some point. But people don't really understand what kind of businesses they can actually open in Pasco. It's all fun and games when you say, oh, yeah, if you've got a dream, you can chase it. You can do this. The reality is that it's actually a lot more complicated than people want to acknowledge when they're trying to sell you the idea that you can open your business. And there's a lot of hunger in the community to understand from us, the city that puts these regulations in place, what you can do versus what you can't and how they're going to access that. You know, now let's talk about downtown for a minute because this one came up. This came up several times, as a matter of fact. People don't understand what you can or you cannot do in downtown Pasco. For example, if you were to walk your dog in downtown Pasco, do our regulations and codes suggest that you have to have a waste bag in your hand to pick up dog fecal matter? Do you know the answer to that question? Do anyone except the staff know? Because most of the people that I've spoken to, both at this event and outside of this event, have no frickin' clue. They have no idea if they're in a wheelchair why it is that some of the sidewalks are so narrow that you cannot bring a wheelchair downtown. They have no idea. They do not, on a fundamental level, understand what you're asking them to do when they are downtown. That's a problem. It creates anger, it creates acrimony, and it creates confusion. And one of the biggest things that came out of that public hearing that I was at, that my fellow commissioners were at, is that people are confused about what we expect and what we ask for. And we have an obligation to fix that. That is not on them, that is on us. And we have to fix it. The next one, too, is they want clarity on code enforcement. Now, we have a lot of really good people who serve on the Code Enforcement Board. It's a vital tool, and we're going to talk about Planning Commission, too, because that one came up, so buckle up on that one. We have all of these wonderful boards and commissions that do an excellent job and work really, really hard. We can always talk about how we improve them. The problem is the public doesn't always know how to interact with them. They don't really know, for example, how they're supposed to interact with the Code Enforcement Board. This was one that was specifically named. What do? Do you just sit down in the gallery over there and watch them? Is there a specific form you have to fill out to speak? How does it work? Now, as a civics nerd, I could probably, if you gave me 20 minutes, figure it out. But to an average person that is working 1, 2, or even 3 jobs to make ends meet, who doesn't really obsess about politics and the internal structure of a statute the way some of us with no lives do, they don't have that 20 minutes or 30 minutes to look in that. You can see how that would be problematic, right? You can see that we need to maybe rethink that approach, and that's what we were told. Let's talk about another one that we got. Make code enforcement more understandable in graphics and flowcharts. Now, personally, I will tell you, I hate flowcharts. If indeed heck exists and I end up there, it will be flowcharts and ABBA music. And the reality is, for most people who are not me, Flowcharts actually do add a sense of clarity. And we did have a few members of the public, as I recall, express that if they saw it put out in a neatly organized flowchart that was easy to follow from point A to point B all the way down to point Z, they felt that it would help them to better answer their own questions. They felt that it would better allow them to trust in the process. So that's something to consider, because really, when we say education campaign, this one gets a bad rap, but the reality is when you hold an education campaign, you're not saying that the community is ignorant, you're not saying they're dumb, you are not saying anything other than you understand that they have a question and you're seeking to answer that question and give them the fullest information possible. And what the public was asking for in this is they want more emphasis on these education campaigns and for us to reach out further. One of the things in 34 years of living here that I have loved deeply about this city is that we have one of the most active citizen bases anywhere in the state. We have this weird stereotype that people don't care or they don't show up. That's actually not true. They do care. What they're asking us for is to show them how. What they're asking us for is to give them an answer so that they can plug in. That's what they're asking for. So next, and they called it the Planning Committee, but we all know they mean the Planning Commission. I'll save us all the trouble of wondering on this one. They had a very similar comment about the Planning Commission that they did the Code Enforcement Board look. This is probably the one area, much like basic math, where I struggle here. Because if you asked me to read a statute relating to how something is supposed to be planned or where you can build a mall, I'm going to look at you, give you a thumbs up, and pretend I was doing it, but really I'm not going to do it because it makes my head hurt. A lot of people look at our Planning Commission and they get that it's important. They understand it's a vital piece of our government here that we have in Pasco. They get that it's citizen-led. But it's harder for them to understand what the Planning Commission is actually doing in a given moment. And some of you came to the council after serving on the Planning Commission, and I know the former chair of the Planning Commission is right over there. Hi, Zara. How you doing? The reality is that when you have a board or commission as important as code enforcement or planning, people are asking for an education as to what it does, what it doesn't do, what you're supposed to do if you want to speak to that board. That's basically it. And it may seem like basic, common sense would say this to someone, again, whose life is not deeply involved in politics, who's just trying to live their lives, just trying to be a good citizen of our city, and who's just trying to do what we ask of them. It's not as simple as you think it is. It's harder to follow. I mean, if you don't have 20 minutes to go over an hour and a half to go over the last Planning Commission video, you're not going to know what they're doing. I don't know what they're doing. So that's another one of those things. So say it with me, people, education campaigns. You don't have to say it. But education campaigns help our citizenry, and that's what they're asking us for. The next question that we asked the people that attended our last event is, how can the city be more culturally inclusive and help foster a shared sense of belonging in our community? Now, we've all heard this one, but it was really, I appreciated how the public and the people that came to our event explained this. They talked about the fact that we need to use multiple languages that are actually reflected in the community. Now, in the previous presentation, they made reference to the 2020 census. While we're in COVID, let's be honest, our city doesn't have a whole heck of a lot of money to throw around. We are stewards of the taxpayer's dollar, and we operate in very strict ways with our money because that is a part of the public trust we can never afford to violate. And the reality is you can't pay for a flyer to go in 100 million different languages, but you can look at the 2020 census. You can identify the top 10 languages that are spoken in the city of Pasco, and it won't break your bank account to figure out how you can communicate with the public in those ways. Because let's be honest here, you never would have taken the step of making an inclusion commission if you didn't care deeply about making sure everybody got served. And that's really what our community is telling us. They understand that the two majority populations in our city speak, as a rule, English and Spanish. But we have AAPI people from different cultures that live here. We have Estonians, Russians, Orthodox Greeks. We have all kinds of communities here that never really get the attention, and we do need to start focusing on them because our city is growing. Make no mistake, we're getting bigger, and we will have more diversity as we go along. So what you do with that, how you interpret what I just said is up to you, but this is what the public told us. Have the city staff, commission/elected officials all consider what diversity means. You know, that might seem like a hippie-ish thing that was thrown out from the 1960s, love on your brother and that sort of thing, but really it's an important guidepost. If all diversity means to someone is that you stack a bunch of people who look different in a picture, you take that picture, and then that's it, well, then we know that you're not really going to be able to diversify the workforce, that you are missing a few components and you need assistance. But if diversity means to you, you know, seeing how many more languages we can afford to put things out in, figuring out why marginalized community A, B, and C doesn't feel comfortable standing at a dais, that's the kind of understanding of diversity that isn't missing a few pieces that might actually really be able to allow our city to reach its full potential. Understanding, for example, that we have a lot of religious communities, from the LDS community that has a unique history of persecution to the Catholic community to just about any community you can name. Understanding that there are people who are coming from deeply traumatized cultures and backgrounds and that they're looking for a place of safety where they can be part of the team, that's important. Share all future projects going on. This is an answer that fascinated me, because if you actually look at what you as the city council have done, let's talk about this for a minute. You've reformed Peanuts Park. You've put an overpass that everybody was begging for. You busted your butt and lobbied the legislature to allow us to have a water park thing. You know, you worked hard on those things. When the public sees those things in development, it's very exciting. But what they're asking you to do is to share with them what you're doing more. And I know it's easy to think, but I posted it. I did A, B, and C. And that should be it. The reality is that, again, you have a story to tell, and for whatever reason, it's not making it across that crowded street where all the cars are going by to Jimmy, who's on the other side of the street waving at you like a madman, hoping you'll look at him, and he's trying to hear the vital life or death information you're trying to display to him. So we have to figure out, and what they're asking us to figure out, is how to share what is going on. Peanuts Park was an achievement, a historic one. You know, the things that you've been able to do with downtown, those are historic. The voice that you represent in Pasco, you know, your response to the animal shelter crisis, where you've demanded accountability, where you've said enough is enough, that's not who we are as Pasco, that was historic. People need to hear this more. And they're telling us this. They need to hear the story you have to tell. Add inclusive faces to the city webpage to represent the community. That one was an example that was given by a member of the public at our meeting, and what I understood this to mean is they're not talking about just generic black or brown faces. They're talking about actual faces that represent the demographic makeup of our actual community here in Pasco. They want something that looks like Pasco. Not Washington State as a whole, not Kennewick, not Richland. Specifically, they want our city, when we are putting pictures and things out, to look like Pasco. And, you know, I think that it is an interesting comment, and I'd be very curious to see where the city council takes that one, but that was what we were told. Let's see here. The next one is in downtown.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
I hate to pull this card on you. We're about a third of the way through our agenda. Can you pick up the pace just a little bit, please?
Wow. A third of the way through the agenda. How time flies. Well, we'll just do 2 from each one. The next question we asked them was, how can our city improve outreach to our community events? Oh, this is a good one. So when we asked them how we could improve outreach, they suggested that we do something like what the superintendent of Pasco School does, where each of you have some sort of coffee time in the community. I don't know what she calls it. It's been a while since I've been in school. But they asked us to consider having each of you do that, where you make yourself available, maybe go to a coffee shop, have a cup of coffee, invite people to speak to you. The second one I'll bring up is connect by improving community awareness to cultural sensitivity. I kind of feel like we went through that one, so I'm going to go through that. Okay, next question, how can our city better communicate what services are available? What services, I hope this is fast enough for you, Councilman Serrano. What services would you like to see from the city in the future? Notification of resources that help with rent, utility bills, purchasing a home, starting business loans, etc. Share outreach in a variety of ways beyond digital, Facebook, and website. I think by that one they meant think outside the box, like maybe go back to newspaper ads in alternative and alternative language newspapers. Don't just rely on the internet to get it done for you. And finally, we're almost done, Pete. Don't worry. Goals from the Idec work plan and actions taken. So these two goals go together: introduce evaluation and assessment tools, introduce annual inclusion audit and scorecard. Well, when we saw those goals, the action that we took is Naima Chambers-Smith and several other members of the commission found GARE, the Alliance on Race and Equity Toolkit. You can see on the bottom there a link to it. It's a free resource. It's a great evaluation tool to help. And so there's that one. And let's see here. Goal 3C, help City of Pasco develop a strategic equity plan. Idec provided City Council a strategic equity plan outline. This is another example of you not telling your story. You have, in fact, been presented with this. You implemented it into your 2021 and 2022 biennial budget. We did give you a work product. You've already used it. People may not realize this, but this is an example of your commission working for you. Okay, goals from the Idec work plan. All right, this one will be quick. Goal 3D, recommend open trainings to be accessible to the community and local business owners looking to educate themselves on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We provided you a list of trainings, and we also provided you a list of community partners that you could work with. These trainings are free, and as this is a matter of public record, the public can see them and take them for themselves. Let me reiterate, costs you zero money. How exciting is that? All right, finally, recommendations to the council. Our number one recommendation is that you keep Idec going. If you want to put new people on it, that's your prerogative. But this is a valuable tool. It is yielding results. And when COVID is gone, mercifully, it will be able to do even more, and we have built a foundation that will allow it to progress. The next one is extend the current commission term pending council's decision to utilize Idec. The idea behind this was that you want people who've done this before, who can correct any misconceptions and help the council or help the new commissioners coming in to understand what they're supposed to do, so that you don't have people that think that somehow we have more power than you do, or who speak out of school or out of turn. So you want knowledge and experience and institutional memory. Finally, consider participating in or sponsoring community event collaborations such as the MLK Day or of Service event, things like Juneteenth. You can pick any wonderful holiday that our community, the people in our community celebrate, but figure out how to establish a metric of what kind of co-sponsorship you could do, how you could partner with an event in such a way that it reflects the city. All right, there's a bunch of gears that form a tree. Overall conclusions, we're almost done. All right, despite the challenges that Idec has, that we experienced, Idec has been a net positive. It has done a great deal of work for you, and it is in fact helping you as we speak, because it's already been implemented in some of your core plans. The second one is Idec establishes the city or proves the city's commitment to equity and inclusion. Remember, nobody forced you to make Idec. There was no controversy. You did it all on your own. Conservatives, liberals, moderates, progressives, non-political people, they all came together specifically because they thought something needed to be done. You made this tool on your own. Idec is dedicated to serving the people of our city and has strictly followed, this is one. So, we are not political, and I must stress this. We resist any efforts from anyone to make us political. We are servants, nothing more, nothing less. And we saw a little bit of this last time over the governor's mandates and things. It wasn't that the suggestion was a bad one. It was that that was not our place in that specific time, and with the mandate we were given to address some of the issues that were raised. We are not political. We are an advisory board representing you. You are not political. You are the city of Pasco. Finally, and I'm going to just consolidate these last three together for you, It's a team effort. No one person has the market on inclusion, equity, and diversity. We all rise or we all fall together. We ask questions, like, for example, when Councilman Serrano asked me about whether we were going to schools, it was a shocking question at the time, but the reality is he would not have been doing his job if he didn't ask that question, because that was a misconception he had clearly heard in the community that I was able to correct because it was asked to me. There are no stupid questions. You asking questions is part of making us better, and our commitment is to making us better. So it is a team effort, and it is essential to everything we do. And as you can see with the trainings and the things we've already done, it saves you money and it brings more people in. And if we don't bring more people in, what is the point? All right, any questions from council members? See, I told you I could do it quickly. I see that smile under that mask. I know I've touched a heart and mind. I see a red light.
Councilmember Mill, do you have?
Thank you, Mayor. I had a couple quick questions here for you, and I really appreciate your presentation, Chairman Robinson. So my question to you was, on the survey, how many people did you get coming to your event or called in by Zoom? Do you have an idea of how many people that answered these questions?
Well, it's been a while since the event happened. I believe that we had around 10 of them. And that's actually pretty good considering that COVID and Zoom fatigue has set in at this point. But we had 10. It always seems small, but the feedback we get seems to be emblematic of bigger things that also seem to be backed up in your other surveys.
Okay. And then my next question was, I know on the transparency issue, and hopefully you can hear me fine, on the transparency issue, did the language part of that, was Spanish ever an issue? I mean, did you ever have anybody say that they couldn't access things because it was, you know, English was not their first language? Did that issue come up at all? You talked about not being able to read codes and stuff like that, but was it a language barrier or they just couldn't find it?
The way that people bring that up because of the stereotypes involved in that is that they won't talk about what they can or cannot experience. They will talk about people that they know. And we don't know who the people that they know are, but they'll speak in more general terms. Yes, that has come up. Not just in Spanish, but we've had comments made to us that in other languages, you know, and I don't know what other languages specifically were referenced because they weren't pointed out. But yes, people have communicated to us that, quote, people they know cannot do thing A, B, or C, or cannot access thing A, B, or C, or could not read the code because it wasn't in the language that they preferred, or that it was harder for them.
Okay, I appreciate that. And then my final question, I know a while ago you guys had talked about wanting some kind of, and again, maybe I'm wrong on this, but I had heard some kind of money as far as like a budget, and I know you lay out a lot of this stuff here as free, which I love free. That's every councilman loves free. But you had mentioned that, or at least I'd heard, and again, I could be wrong, that the Diversity Commission was asking for money per year that the city give them to operate a budget. Is that still the case, or did I misconstrue that?
I believe that the money that we were asking for had specifically been related to an event we were doing, and we found a way to work around that, actually, because we had wanted to use a little bit of money, not much, but a little bit relating to an event, but someone generously donated money to get the prizes for that specific event, so it became a non-issue. Whether or not the Idec Commission gets money is going to depend on you, and it's going to depend on what you want it to do. And so the way that I would say it is, we were thinking of requesting something for a specific event. City staff may have their own ideas about what an Idec Commission would need in the future, but I'm not aware of any requests that the Commission made beyond that specific event that we be allocated funds.
Okay, so just to clarify, you're asking us to extend it, but you're not asking for any kind of future budget or anything like that. You just want to extend what you're doing, but again, not cost the city any money. Is that correct?
That is correct. I'm not asking you for money, Dave.
Okay.
David, I gotta quit calling you Dave. I keep looking at his name tag. You're David.
All right, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yep, all right.
Any other questions, comments?
Just a couple. Thank you for your presentation. Jeffrey, how many Idec commissioners are there currently?
Oh my goodness. Okay, so there's myself, Kyle, Naima, Jordan, Eloise. So there's at least 5 or 6 of them. I know that we've had one drop off because she moved, I believe. So there should be 6 of us.
And just from what you know, are all of those Idec commissioners willing to stay on and continue to serve if Idec was extended or became permanent?
I believe that the vast majority of them would, and I think you would be lucky to have them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to add, thank you for that great presentation. I know it was a little long, but it was wonderful. Thank you. And I like a lot of the ideas, especially the education campaign, as you mentioned. I hear a lot of questions and concerns about codes and not understanding them. So I think it was a valid point that you brought up in there. And thank the commission, actually, for all their work as well.
I will definitely do that. They are a wonderful bunch, and thank you.
All right, no other comments? Oh, yes.
Thank you for picking up the pace at my request. I appreciate that. One of the things that I think you guys have delved into, and if the commission is restructured and re-entered, I really would like to see the future commission address, and maybe I missed this. In the initial resolution, it's under section 3, number 1. And then when we brought it back, it was section 6, number 1. And I'm not asking you to remember these, but this was something that we specifically codified. And I recall making sure we had this. It was to examine the practices and procedures of the city of Pasco.
Mm-hmm.
And of everything that I've been presented, I've yet to really see a categorization that you all dove deep into work practices or work procedures or particular regulations by the city of Pasco that really say this is where we're missing the mark. Of course, you know, we've got the public input, and that's the overwhelming bulk of what your charge was. But what I think one of the key missing points from everything that I've read and heard from you was a lack of examination of the existing procedures and practices. And I would really like to see that, one, if you have it and I miss the mark, you know, send it to me. We don't have to cover this in the rest of the meeting. Or if staff has it, Ms. Pichon, if she's got it, please send it my way so I can understand where I'm missing the mark. But again, looking to the future, that is something that I would really like to see, is that deep dive into the city, say this is really where you're missing the mark. And again, I think talking about social media, those are not really, in my opinion, what we want in the practices and procedures. I think those are tools. Again, if the city has some type of just low-hanging fruit where we've fallen flat as a city by ordinance, I'd really like to know that.
Well,
so,
you did miss the mark, but I still love you. You missed the mark in the sense of we presented you with a strategic plan, which you outlined, which you then adopted and then adapted to your own purposes, setting, and I believe part of this was setting hiring goals and things of that nature. So actually, we did tell you that the workforce lacks diversity. We then gave you an outline that you could adapt for your own purposes to work on that. We also identified that there's a lot of confusion and concern relating to trainings. And one of the biggest issues that you personally presented us with was that any trainings that we would suggest shouldn't hurt the city's bottom line, especially in a pandemic and an economic crisis. The slides detailing both the community, or the list you were given of community partners that you could work with, and the trainings that you were provided were our attempt within the confines of the rules of mission that we were given to provide you with the resources you needed, because frankly, there is some concern on the part of the community as to what diversity trainings are being offered, who's getting them, how they are occurring, and this was our attempt to supplement. The ultimate authority in all of this really is you. We can go complicated, and if you renew the commission and you would like to set a specific list of things you want us to do or regulations you want us to look at, we can absolutely do that, or I should say, not we, because I won't be there, but the next branch of the commission. But the reality is, within the confines of what you asked us to do and the time frame that we had, we did actually do what you asked us to do. And if you'd like, you can go back and look at that, and I can privately go through those trainings with you, and we can decide together whether or not they are things that city staff should be exposed to. But the reality is, we did, and we need to be focusing on the focus of this incarnation of your Idec commission was to build a foundation, because we cannot solve every problem immediately. The work of diversity, equity, and inclusion is not to be done in an afternoon. It takes a long time, and it is something that involves commitment. We secured a foundation. We answered your questions in the time that we had with the mission we had to the best of our ability. It is now incumbent upon you, if you decide to continue this commission, to further refine the charter, to make clear to them what it is you want them to do in that area specifically, which areas are of concern that you're hearing that we're not, and then it is on us to build upon the foundation that has already been established to go further. We have begun. We have not ended, and we have a long ways to go before we can even think about ending, in my opinion. And if memory serves, you tend to like things done correctly the first time. You don't strike me as someone who tolerates half-assed work.
Thank you for that. Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mayor Barajas, and thank you, Ms. Robinson, for your presentation tonight. And I'm going to reframe, I think, what I heard you say there at the end, which is that the Idec so far has done work to build the understanding of the scope and scale of this. Where are the big failing points? What are we hearing from people? And what I heard from Mr. Serrano is that we need the rubber to hit the road next, right? Where we start actually going into the deep dive of the technical details of how to do this and what to do. And so I think I certainly support that as being the evolution. I support that there is a next generation of this, or a continued work of this, and the focus really needs to be on that implementing these various ideas at a specific implementable level. I think because you ask any of the council members here, we can certainly outline some problems, and we can certainly outline some solutions, with a greater or lesser effectiveness. But I think that what we really were looking for from the commission was some of those implementations. So I think from this point forward, I think we have a lot of the groundwork laid. And so with the plan we have going forward that we've already, as you pointed out, adopted into our budget, and with the reformed and continuing commission, we could focus on those implementation to get us those actual benefits that we're looking for. So I look forward to that. I think not to say that there isn't direct benefit from the work that has been done. Obviously, just even having the conversation brings out more voices and gets people back connected and felt heard. So that's what I guess I support going forward, is continuing this work and implementing the recommendations of this next few years.
Well,
thank you.
I will say this. I think Councilmember Serrano raises a wonderful point about the future. I really do. You have evaluation tools. We now know that this commission isn't just some rubber stamp. It actually does things. It has important work that it's trying to do. I think you're both right. If this is the direction that the council wants more emphasis on in the future, make that known and give a very clear understanding to the Idec of what you want us to prioritize next time, and then let's get started, because the whole point of this was to demonstrate and build all of that foundational work so that this wouldn't become like an Idec commission in some of the other cities that have tried them, where they did nothing more than sit on their hands and do nothing. This was a hard-working commission that busted its butt on this, gave you evaluation tools, did what you asked it to do in full expectation that you would either decide you didn't want us anymore, or that you'd be ready and willing and able to commit to taking the next step, which is to ask those even harder questions than the one we've asked now.
Thank you. So I do want to say thank you for your very thorough presentation. I also have to agree, when the Idec first started, it was to see what was going on in the community. It was to see what Pasco needed to fix, needed to do. We clearly have a plan now. You've established that. And so I actually do look forward to the implementation of your survey questions, of your ideas with the new commission. So thank you again, and we'll work out the details as we move forward. Thank you again.
You got this, Madam Mayor. You all do. And there are no bad questions. Thank you for your time. It was wonderful to see you all. I was going to do an emotional goodbye, but meeting's running long. We can't have that. All right, thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we move forward to item C, ordinance PMC amendments in Title 25, zoning increasing residential building capacities, E2SHB 1923, and we have Director White and Mr. Gonzalez.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And again, Planning Manager Jacob Gonzalez is here. We're nearing the conclusion of an initial 2-year effort to bring a product to council that's focusing on increasing housing affordability and increasing housing choices here in Pasco. Mr. Gonzalez will go through the details of that, but you've seen this presentation several times now. And we have a goal in mind of bringing this back to council at the next regular scheduled council meeting for some kind of action.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. And as Director White mentioned, that the purpose of this presentation is to summarize what we presented during the past meetings with the council, and also what we've shared with the Planning Commission over the past 2 years or so. And I think this proposal actually encompasses a lot of the reoccurring themes of this evening's meeting with regards to access to parks and equity as well. So we are working on the last 2 action items associated with House Bill 1923, which was enacted again in 2019 with the Washington State Legislature as an effort to increase residential building capacity. So the 2 remaining actions, Action 1, duplexes, triplexes, and courtyard apartments, and Action 3, accessory dwelling units or ADUs. Action 2 was adopted and approved by council last spring with regards to lot size averaging, and has been a flexible tool available to our builders for the past couple of months. I thought it was important to state the key differences between affordable housing and housing affordability, because these 2 terms get thrown around quite a bit with housing discussions. And so just kind of as a brief overview on these 2 components. Affordable housing is subsidized. It is set and intended to provide for housing for a specific income threshold established by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Usually affordable housing is partnered with housing authorities, and in our case, the Franklin County Housing Authority. Whereas housing affordability is the general cost of housing relative to household incomes in our community. I wanted to point out that Pasco has approximately 1,348 federally subsidized homes. By 2025, the affordability restrictions on 667 of those homes, or about 49%, will expire. Now they can be re-out, but that is a threat to us. When we began this effort, or when the state began this effort in 2018, the median home value in Pasco was $242,000. Currently, home values are hovering around $372,000. Now that's based on Zillow. There's a variety of resources, but they publish theirs the most frequent. The median listing price for a home in Pasco right now is $410,000. The average rent for a 2-bedroom apartment increased 28% over the previous year. I think the data and the variety of other resources available with regards to housing market indicate that we have challenges with both meeting our affordable housing goals and housing affordability for our residents here at the City of Pasco.
Mr. Gonzalez, can I jump in real quick? I apologize, but just want to, so when you're talking about there's maybe some houses that lose that federal support, this is truly a federal level action, not something that's related to the city or the county?
I'd have to check into the details about how those potential homes are allowed to remain at that threshold level. It might be a partnership either through our community development block grant program, and also with the housing authority, who probably has a little bit more authority on that than we do as a city.
Okay, if there's some role that we play, I'd like to understand that better in the future. Thank you.
Certainly. So one of the methods to increase access to housing is to simply allow more housing. Action 1 would permit duplexes, triplexes, and courtyard apartments in more zoning districts than are currently allowed today. These are currently or commonly known as missing middle housing, and that's because they represent that gap between single-family detached homes and apartments. They are able to provide a variety of benefits to the community because they bridge that gap between low, middle, and high-density areas. They can support walkable neighborhoods and locate enough residents nearby to support neighborhood retail and transit options. They appeal to a broader range of options because there is a broader range of options. And I think one key thing for us here, especially as we grow so much on our industrial employment, is that they can help support the long-term economic sustainability of a community because they can provide housing choices needed to support and attract businesses and their employers. We're hearing a lot about workforce housing. This certainly is one potential solution to that. The other component with regards to Action 3 are accessory dwelling units, or ADUs. These are smaller independent dwelling units located on the same lot as a standalone home. Now, we currently permit attached ADUs, so they are attached to the primary dwelling, but we have very limited regulations and guidance and guidelines for these housing products. So they are difficult both for the applicant and also for the city because there's not a lot of guidance to move forward with the permitting process. So ADUs are typically owned and managed by homeowners who live on the premises. Now, we aren't going to require a homeowner requirement in our proposal, but individual housing choices change over time and household demographics and dynamics change over time, and permitting ADUs allows for quite a bit of flexibility for a family or a household to expand, or for many in our community to age in place as well. They offer potential entry-level options for folks looking for housing in the city of Pasco who may not be able to afford or require a full-size home either. I thought it would be important also to touch on some of our current policies. Now, within the existing city limits, our land use is fairly restrictive to anything but single-family detached homes. Within the city limits, excluding Broadmoor, over 80% of our residential land uses do not allow for an attached home. That's something including a duplex or a zero lot line home. And that can be fairly restrictive, obviously, when we're in a housing crunch across the country. And you see a map there that could probably be updated at this point with some of the recent growth. But historically, the city has some fairly restrictive zoning policies, and we'll look at some potential measures to help eliminate that in the future. This is the Planning Commission and staff recommendations following the council meetings, I believe in August, and they represent some very minor changes to what the Planning Commission recommendation last year. So we are not, there is no recommendation to change zoning, the housing typologies permitted in the RS20 zoning district. That has been left alone for this proposal. Now, there is always the option for a property owner or a builder or developer to rezone to an RS12 or something else that fits their need, but this proposal would not apply to the RS20 zoning district. We are proposing changes to RS12, where we would permit duplexes across RS12 lots and permit triplexes on corner lots within a quarter mile of a public land use or a facility. So that includes civic uses, parks, schools, playgrounds, hospitals, public transportation routes. We would not permit courtyard apartments in the RS12 zoning district. In the RS1 district, we would permit duplexes and triplexes, and this time permit courtyard apartments on corner lots within a quarter mile of that public land use or civic facility. And in the R1 district, we would permit all three of those options by right. And you can see that they are already permitted in the R2, 3, and 4 zoning districts. And I think it's important to clarify that those are the zoning districts that we have the most limited to supply in. We also wanted to actually make these changes realistic for the developer, a builder, or a property owner. Many times communities will enact these policies but then not update the actual underlying development regulations, so they're still not feasible. So we wanted to eliminate that problem here. Again, no change to the RS20 or RS12 in this proposal. We would increase the height from 25 feet to 35 feet in the RS1 district, in the R1 district, and also in the R2 district. You can actually see that, kind of reiterating that point that was just made. We actually had a lower height limit in the RS1 through R2 than we did in our RS20, RS12. And that's one of those barriers where the policy makes sense, but it's not actually feasible. Also in the R2 district, we would allow the the lot coverage to be determined by the parking and setback requirements. So this allows greater flexibility for a builder for where a home could be located. And this is also a reference to the Waterfront Development District, which utilizes this same criteria as well.
Mr. Gonzalez, may I interrupt? So is it the recommendation that we retain all the setbacks as they are for each of these zonings as they currently stand?
Yeah, this proposal, yes, does not recommend any changes to setback requirements.
So just give us an example of an RS1, an RS1, what is the setback for an RS1? Do you know? Is it 5 feet, 10 feet?
Yes, it's 10 feet on each side, 25 feet in the front, and a distance equal to the height of the building for the rear yard setback. And then Councilwoman Roach, I do want to add that this is, when I introduced this topic and talked about initial efforts, this is going to be followed up by a housing capacity plan that will definitely take a look at things like setbacks and lot coverage, but we didn't want to get into that because you have to do it very methodically.
Sure.
And so that's coming, and as a matter of fact, it's begun already.
Okay, so I won't get too far into that, but just was considering, and hold on to this question for later. I don't need an answer now, but if that might change depending on whether that's attached or detached. So I was just thinking about that.
I think Mr. Gonzalez will get to that, but I believe the goal is to use the same setback standards for the variety of housing options we're discussing here tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah, on the R3 district, we would leave the height the same and then increase multifamily, so attached housing to 45 feet. The lot coverage remains the same for single family detached homes and is again using that same criteria determined by parking and setbacks for multifamily or attached dwellings. The R4, we leave the maximum height the same, but again use that same criteria for lot coverage. On accessory dwelling units, there's a variety. These are all, for the most part, brand new and part of the proposal from the Planning Commission. And they represent a significant shift and potential and hopefully benefit really to both the user, the applicant, and the city, because now we actually have guidance, design, and development standards for which to permit ADUs. So the recommendation is to allow one of each on any residential parcel if the design, development, and lot standards are met. So while this seems very aggressive, the reality is that most lots, because of their existing structures or where their parking or driveway is located, it's not likely that this will be an option for most lots across the city, but for those that are, these could be potential use. There is no requirement for off-street parking. The owner occupancy requirement has been removed, and short-term rentals have been removed as an option. And I know that's another discussion ongoing with both the Planning Commission soon and eventually Council. And so that component can be reevaluated at the appropriate time. We do put in some numerous measures with regards to design standards, and the intent is to allow for design that's complementary but not necessarily identical to the primary dwelling. So that gives the property owner or the builder, the developer, a little bit more flexibility on materials and somewhat on the aesthetic, but certainly would be complementary but not mimic the exact primary dwelling unit on that lot. We also have provisions for a maximum unit size of 1,000 square feet or 55% of the total square footage of the primary residence, whichever is smaller. And so the intent, again, is not to have a bigger home in the backyard or a bigger home in setback. It's to let that primary dwelling retain that primary dwelling status. And you can see that same criteria placed on the height limitations on accessory dwelling units as well.
Can you go back a slide, please? Maybe, yeah, that's why I didn't key in on it on the slide. I think I heard you say something that relates to a question that I had. I'm looking at various sections of the code, and I'm just going to draw on one, for example, like PMC 2545 25.40.050 development standards. And subsection 2 used to have a specific density. It said 1 dwelling unit per lot, except as provided in another section of the code. Now, what we're modifying this definition to is density is now compliant with comprehensive planned land use element with a maximum gross density of 3 dwelling units. It seems that in several of these development standards, we're pointing to the comprehensive plan, land use plan, to determine whether or not a particular zoning standard is appropriate. Am I understanding that correct? That the zoning standards are now pointing to the comprehensive plan to say, insofar as you fit the mold of what's been adopted in the plan, you're appropriate, whereas it used to be that the zoning standard was essentially set by regulation, by code, and now and the land use plan would essentially have to backdoor into the code. Is that correct?
I'm not sure I would, I think I would communicate it as a kind of a sneaky way around the regulations of the zoning code. I think the intent was to allow for the comprehensive plan to be implemented. Much of our land uses and the underlying zoning districts fall well short of meeting the even the medium dwelling unit potential of what they could potentially or theoretically permit. Now, I think I want to reiterate that this is not a requirement for any builder or developer for any particular zoning district. It is simply an option. And similar to the ADUs, when you incorporate lot coverages, lot standards, setbacks, heights, the financial feasibility of the redevelopment or construction of some of these unit types on a parcel may not pencil out or just may not be in the best interest of the applicant. And so the idea is to begin to align our zoning with our comprehensive plan and make sure our comprehensive plan is updated as necessary to ensure that we are accommodating what's going on in the zoning designations.
Okay. I guess the way I read these, and I could be off, I'm a little concerned that we went from very prescriptive or precise densities, up to X amount of lots per acre in this various standard. And now we're basically saying, insofar as it's congruent with the comprehensive plan, it's okay. I don't know that I don't build, right? I buy, and that happened once, so it's not like I buy often. I'm very concerned that we're kind of kicking a definition by code into how it's defined in a plan that may be modified. I believe, in my opinion, that the code should drive compliance, and then the plan, the plan should support that. And where they're conflicting, the code offers exemptions. We have a process to be in front of the commission itself, or I can't remember what she's called, the commissioner or whatever the land use lady. I guess I'm just concerned that we don't have what I see as a defined density in a lot of these things. Moving away from that, I think, I don't see legal here. I'd like their opinion on that, to confirm that that's appropriate and legal. But again, I express concern that we're taking away prescriptive, defined uses, densities, and going to pointing to the land use plan.
No, certainly, and we can re-add I guess a land use table to each zoning district. That we did this in the actual plan unit development regulations, where a similar concern and question was raised with what is the actual density range. And just for an example, the comprehensive plan states that the low density land use is appropriate for 2 to 5 dwelling units per acre. So that's what that would be referring to. And just as another reference, the density in the area bound by 182, 395 and the Columbia River is 2.1 units an acre. So there you can see that gap between barely achieving our minimum density standards in a significant portion of the community. It almost unfortunately puts the burden on the rest of the community to make up for that gap elsewhere, but we can certainly take a look at providing specific density tables in the regulations if that's helpful.
Yeah, I think that would be extremely helpful. I appreciate that because, I mean, it's been a while since the plan's been before us, and I didn't recall those tables, but, you know, now you jog my memory, and I, you know, my limited PTSD from reviewing those. No, I mean, those were extremely helpful, and I think to the extent that, you know, the last presentation talked about, you know, transparency and ensuring, if we're trying to link language to an existing plan or one that may be modified, let's adopt something so that rather than pointing to something else and saying, insofar as it's congruent with that, we're good. That would be my request. I'm not speaking for council. You know, we can all kind of, if this opinion is relevant, we can all hash it out. But I do think that table, even if it's adopting, you know, reference or whatever, would be helpful so that the development community knows exactly where it's pointing. So I do appreciate that you brought those tables up again. I do recall those now, but that's helpful.
Certainly. The staff initiated a survey to local stakeholders in the fall of 2020 to solicit input on this proposal with regards to House Bill 1923. 95% of the responses indicated that more housing options are needed in Pasco. You can see about 50% identified that rental prices and 57% housing prices are forcing community members to seek housing outside of Pasco. There seemed to be strong support for the allowance and permitting of duplexes, triplexes, and accessory dwelling units. And I think this lines up with what Director Rick White mentioned earlier with another effort that's following up this effort that's headed to the Planning Commission next week, aimed at increasing more flexibility for home builders and developers. And we've actually received a letter of support from the Tri-City Association of Home Builders on that one too. So there's a lot of coordination going on that effort. So I think this proposal helps meet what they're proposing next. From the resident and citizen input side, these are the results from the 2020 National Community Survey. We were given a 36% favorability rating on availability of quality affordable housing, and a 44% on the variety of housing options. Again, there seemed to be strong support for housing incentives, zoning initiatives to increase supply, diversity, and density, and also support for letting the market you know, act as the market does. And I think this proposal certainly allows for all three of these to take place. I wanted to summarize in general the intent and what the benefits of the House Bill 1923 proposal mean for Pasco. They're not requirements, they're not mandates, they're simply options. And I think that's important to clarify because this has been sort of a sticking point in other communities too, that this is not telling a property owner what they will have to do with a property, it's simply allowing more options in conformance with stated adopted plans and policies. It allows the city to reach its comprehensive plan densities, or essentially our growth target, permits greater flexibility for builders, developers, and property owners, and it increases housing options for residents. I wanted to emphasize that last one because I think one of this proposal's greatest values is that it begins to allow access to the places and destinations that residents seek access to. Historically, our comprehensive plan policies have required residential densities to be located only near adjacent to high traveled arterials, high-speed roadways, etc. And that's a common policy amongst many cities because ideally the intent is that if you have access to the road, you can get anywhere you want to, but it forgets that the end result is the actual park or the school or the hospital or the bus stop or your place of employment. And I think this proposal begins to help align and prioritize the actual destination versus the road itself. And I think this is one of the better values of this proposal is that it begins to get us towards that. So with that, again, policy references with regards to council goals, comprehensive plan, the Tri-Cities Consolidated Plan, which will be updated this year. So we'll be working with our peer jurisdictions in Kennewick and Richland with our Community Development Block Grant Coordinator to work on that effort. This proposal is aligned with the Franklin County countywide planning policies and the Washington State Growth Management Act. And the staff report included a letter of support from the Washington State Department of Commerce. I also wanted to point out that staff in December wrapped up a fairly intensive program with the a housing solutions workshop that was hosted by New York University's Furman Center for Housing and the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy. The city of Pasco was one of 5 cities or counties across the country selected to participate. We were the only one in the Western time zone to participate. And we learned quite a bit, and there was a variety of staff involved, from our executive staff team to our community development block grant coordinator, our economic development manager, and obviously planning staff were involved in this effort. And it was fairly evident that one of the easiest and most proactive things that communities could do first before identifying either complicated or complex or even unnecessary policies or methods to increase housing, that one of the easiest things was to identify the gaps in our existing zoning or policy measures and either mitigate or eliminate them. And I think this proposal does just that. So with that, that concludes this presentation. Some of the next steps, obviously, this would wrap up the completion of our House Bill 1923 effort. As Director White mentioned, we are beginning our Housing Action Implementation Plan. We're working on developing the engagement strategy for that effort right now. It will be a phased approach with likely 1, 2, or even 3 phases of development and process updates to increase not only the timeliness of permitting, but certainly the regulatory process. And also wanted to point out that the City of Pasco did apply for the Washington Department Housing Action Plan grant. We have tentatively received approval for an award of $100,000 to help us support the Housing Action Plan. However, that is pending this proposal tonight. So with that, happy to answer any questions, and thank you, Council, for your time this evening.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Any questions or comments? Go ahead, Mayor Protem.
Thank you, Mayor Barajas, and thank you, Mr. Gonzalez, for the presentation. As always, your information is dense and plentiful, and I appreciate how much thought goes into this. One of the takeaways that I kind of pulled from Mr. Robinson's report on the Idec is that sometimes the best thing we can do is communicate very clearly. So let me try to restate and summarize very briefly what you said in as layman of terms as I possibly can. We are giving current homeowners some additional options if they're if their property is designed in such a way that they can. Otherwise, we're allowing developers more flexibility in what sort of developments they can build in future lots. And that's pretty much it, right?
That would be correct.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Go ahead.
Just a quick comment. Thank you again for that presentation as well. And I do like the flexibility for the builders as you presented. And also the ADUs, that's a great concept to add in there. So thank you.
Perfect. With no other comments on this particular topic, we will move forward to item D. The PWRF Pre-Treatment Improvements Update, Director Worley.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council. The last time we were here to talk about the PWRF was back in June, when we were looking at an agreement for a $1.5 million low interest loan for the design of the phase 1 improvements. And so tonight I would like to give you an update on where we're at relative to progress that's been made since then. And to start off, for our new council members, what I thought I would do is first off let you know that what a PWRF is. It's an acronym we use for Process Water Reuse Facility. And what that means is that we have, Pasco has an industrial wastewater treatment plant, basically, and I'll use my cursor here to identify where these are located. But out here in Franklin County, we've got a reuse facility with about 150 million gallons of storage. And we collect wastewater from agricultural industrial users down in the Colotus-Pasco Highway area and in the Foster Wells area. And all their water gets pumped up to our facility. We sort of pre-treat it, screen it, filter it, and then we pump it out onto these farm circles that the city owns and then leases to farmers. And that whole system is a treatment and disposal system for the agricultural industrial wastewater. So you'll hear me talk about the Columbia East service area. That means this lower part. And you'll hear me talk about the Foster Wells service area, which is here. Just to give you another example of where things are, you'll hear me talk about Lamb Weston, and that's in this area here. And you'll hear me talk about the location for Dairy Gold, and that is located right under where these words are right here, that area. So you can see where those are relative to our existing processors and relative to the existing PWRF. Okay? So with that, just real quick, and I want to say, I'm going to go through these slides very quickly, and if you want to go back into details and get into the weeds a little bit, we can certainly come back to them, but I want to get through this fairly quickly because it's been a long evening already. So we have 6 existing processors that send water to our reuse facility, or the PWRF. The 2, or the Grimway that you see right here, is actually going to be connected this next season to the reuse facility. Their wastewater has been going to our water treatment plant, or our wastewater treatment plant. Overall, we gather about 1 billion gallons of water every year that we put on the fields. Now, that's in comparison to a total of 3 billion gallons of water we put on those farm fields. So we put about 1/3 of reuse water and 2/3 of groundwater that we use on those fields. This is our current process right now. It's a very simple process where the processor's flows end up getting pumped up to our pretreatment facility. Like I mentioned, we partially treat it through screening and filtering. It goes out onto the farm fields. Then it infiltrates down into the groundwater, and it's the groundwater that we are protecting with this facility by disposing of this water. We lease the farm circles to local farmers, and those leases are based on what kind of crop they grow. They are required to grow a crop that helps uptake nitrogen, because nitrogen is the biggest element we need to get rid of. The farmers then sell those crops to ranchers or whoever. A lot of times they use it for cattle feed. And the leases from, or the revenue we get from the leases comes to the city of Pasco, and some of it goes to the operations and maintenance of the farm circles, and some of it goes to the city's economic development fund. Okay. We've got a couple of challenges facing us right now. We have nitrogen limits that we're running up against. We're exceeding our permitted limit for ecology. We have an odor issue that we've addressed a little bit recently. Council may recall some maybe not so nice smelling jars of stuff that have been brought to council. We can take care of that a little easier with what's proposed. We're starting to get to our maximum amount of winter storage that is available at our current site. Again, we need to reduce nitrogen levels. Also, we have processors that are interested in growing their operations. Grimway is going to be relocating their flows to our reuse facility. Reesers, as you know, is building a new plant. Simplot would like to expand theirs. Dairy Gold is a brand new processor that's coming to our area. And Lamb Weston has asked that we bring their wastewater into our facility as well. So you may have heard us talk previously about some of the previous studies that have been done. We've done the facility plan that was done by Pace Engineers looking at improvements to the facility. We've also done a value engineering study by RH2 where they looked at other improvements, which includes an anaerobic digester. So with that, we have an opportunity now to make some improvements to the PWRF. You've heard me talk before about the phase 1 project. That was the loan that we got for the design. That is going to bring potable water and more electrical power to the site. There is phase 2, which is the addition of the winter storage ponds. We're looking at expanding that quite significantly. The phase 3 project now is to look at the improvements to the pretreatment process, and that's the proposed anaerobic digester and the nitrogen removal process. Now, A lot of the work that we're doing so far with the design and some of the construction is coming from low interest loans, like I mentioned, from state agencies. We've also got grants that have been received from Franklin County from their Economic Development Fund to help support this. These improvements will bring an additional jobs to the region. It'll increase revenues as well to the city and to the farmers. And there's a potential that we could do biogas production with what is currently being proposed. We were approached about the middle of last year by a company called Sustainable Energy Ventures. The Port of Pasco sent them our direction. They were interested in finding out more about our reuse facility. When I explained the purpose of it and what we do with it, they came to us with a proposal. And they came to our processors with a proposal. And this is the proposal that they gave. They gave a big presentation to our processors and basically said, we would like to build an anaerobic digester for the processors and be able to capture the methane gas that comes off of it and turn it into renewable natural gas. So in order to move forward, we needed three things. One, we needed better sampling results from all of our processors. Two, we want to do a 30% design of what's proposed to ensure that things will work out. And three, we'll need a financial model to determine whether or not this is going to be feasible. All the processors said yes to this approach to SEV. So they said, let's see what SEV can come up with. So the staff and processors embarked on a process to get better data on the constituents that are in the wastewater from all the processors and the wastewater that goes out onto the fields from the reuse facility. This is an example of some of the data that we collected over time. We have the same data for all the processors. From that, we were able to put together this chart, which is what's called the basis of design for what SEV is proposing. If you want any details about this, I can certainly go into it. But this is the basis for the 30% design. That 30% design is intended to be completed by the end of this month. So we should have more information very, very soon. From that data, we had one of our consultants put this flow chart. I heard earlier that very simple flow charts make things easy to understand. This is one of those. So this is an optional flow chart that shows different options for SEV to look at depending on how much property we have to put the water on. We have 1,850 acres now. What if we added 400 acres? Would we be able to have smaller nitrogen removal systems? What if we added another 140 acres? So this is a flow chart that shows those options. The more acreage that we have to put the water on, the less nitrogen we need to remove from the wastewater because we can put it on the land and let the land remove it. Okay? And this allows SEV to optimize the design. Based on that, this is another one of those very simple flow charts that have been come up with. And this is what SEV and their engineering company, Evoqua, has put together. So you can tell the level of detail that's going into this already. And in the upper left-hand corner of the first sheet is some of the data that shows how each of these systems starts removing some of the constituents in the wastewater. And the other table up here talks about the amount of methane gas that is produced so that SEV can determine how much revenue they'll get by selling natural gas. Okay, so in summary, what this looks like is we will be able to take an average of about 6.57 million gallons of water per day, run it through the system, and basically run it through the low-rate anaerobic digester, remove the nitrogen from it, put it into the storage ponds, and then eventually back onto the same fields we have and maybe even more. What the process will do is reduce the BOD, which is a biochemical oxygen demand. We don't need to get into details, but it'll reduce the BOD by 90%, and it will reduce the nitrogen in the water by over 50%, which means we can put more water on the property that we already have. Okay? So with that, We are looking at the potential for what is called industrial symbiosis. And this is a process where we take the waste from one industry and we turn it into a valuable product for another industry. In this case, we're taking wastewater and we're turning it into potentially renewable natural gas and then putting it on the land. This is what has been coined now a private-public-private partnership, which is the processors are private, the city is public, SEV for the RNG, the natural gas is private, and then the partnership of all three of us. Okay, so this is a process that we're looking into, and we wanted to get council's feedback on whether or not this is the right direction we should be going. The more processors we have involved in this process, the more methane gas that gets produced and the more shared cost of this goes into the improvements that are proposed. One of the things I forgot to mention, and it's a very important one, is that the processors pay for all of the operations and maintenance and all of the capital improvements on the reuse facility. The city and the taxpayers, the residents, don't pay for those. Okay, so it's a self-sustaining process. So with that, we wanted to just get some feedback from council. Are we headed in the right direction? Does council think this is a good idea? Should we keep moving forward with it? There won't be any final commitments to anything unless we come back to council, because there will be agreements that are needed and all that kind of stuff. So we just wanted to kind of share this with you and see if you had any thoughts, comments, questions, and an indication as to whether we're heading in the right direction. So with that, I will be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Director Worley. Go ahead, Councilman Serrano.
Thank you. Let me make sure I've got this correct. No cost to the city. It's going to likely improve efficiency and will reduce our environmental footprint. And the end users and essentially investors or ratepayers are interested in this.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. I don't recall hearing a downside.
We just wanted to make sure. No one else has approached the city with a proposal like this. So we think that it's an opportunity where everybody wins. And we'll know more at the end of this month. We'll get the 30% design. We'll get the cost model. We'll figure out how much it costs and go from there.
I guess the one thing I could kind of foreshadow being problematic, and I don't know that this is necessarily the city's concern, is anything that may occur with ecology, just ensuring that they're both in the loop, as well as that, you know, especially with the session hitting, the legislative session, that is, that they're not going to see any type of regulatory pushback, you know, from any of the proposed bills. Obviously, that could be a bill to get to nowhere or whatever the case may be. I guess just kind of be mindful of that, and I'm sure you guys are, but
we definitely are. You'll see Maria up here just in a few moments, but she has scheduled a quarterly meeting with ecology. So we meet with ecology regularly, and we're constantly filling them in on all of the projects that Pasco has right now, and they have really enjoyed that coordination with us because there is so much going on. And we have noticed a very huge effort on their part to help Pasco out in the reviews that are required and doing it in a more timely fashion. They are totally on board with this if we can make it work. If it pencils out, if the processors are game for it, then anything we can do to improve the water quality of the wastewater going on the fields, ecology is very supportive of.
Thank you. I appreciate your guys' foresight in this.
Councilman Campos.
Mr. Worley, thank you for that concise and very nice presentation. You've answered most of my questions. Comments I have are very much looking forward to additional jobs in the area. I'm familiar with affluent waste treatment basins, and so this was kind of cool to see that you bring in an anaerobic digester and potentially create revenue streams. So I really like the symbiosis there. And then when you mentioned the capital improvements and maintenance costs directly on the interested party, SEV, Again, I kind of see no downside either. So, but with all things, if they seem too perfect, maybe there is something that like we're not seeing. And I think somebody who has a background in risk management might feel keen on that. So that's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Worley.
Thank you. Councilman Milne.
Thank you, Mayor. And also thank you, Director Worley, for putting this together. I know you've taken me out there to the wastewater treatment plant, and it's quite the eye-opener. I would recommend the new council members, if they get the opportunity, to go out there. Just a quick question here. I know we have talked about the smell, which we all did, the jars and everything, and then going out there, it was quite eye-opening. And I know we've done things to reduce it. How much is it reduced? I mean, could you actually go out there with the windows down and actually not smell it, or is it still somewhat bad?
It depends. The biggest odor creator previously was a sediment pond that we used for all the sediment that we captured through all of our screening and filtration process. We would dump it in this pond, and then it would store up, and after several years, it just started, turning really bad, and started smelling really bad. The other side of this is that when we have the wastewater being stored in the wintertime in the ponds, and then as spring comes along and the weather starts warming up, then all of a sudden the water in the ponds start warming up, and there's this thing called, where the pond turns over, where the colder water on the bottom will rise and the warmer water will, and all of a sudden all the stuff on the bottom comes to the top, and then the odors come back again. It's a natural process in wastewater. And so the idea here is that we pre-treat the water through the anaerobic digester and the nitrogen removal system before we put it into the storage ponds. Okay. So the idea is it's much cleaner. We don't have that same degradation of the biologics that are in the water while it's in the pond. It's already taken care of prior to it getting there.
Okay, well, I love that idea, and hopefully we can move forward with it. I'm definitely for this, so thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Barajas, and thank you, Mr. Worley, for this. I won't reiterate the fact that this is a great idea, but I just have a couple questions. About what percentage are we looking at increasing with the new processing demands? I understand that we're already at capacity, but I just don't remember. I know you've told me before, but about when we're talking about the additional capacity that's being requested of us, about how much of that's a growth is that?
Are you looking at flow rate, total volume?
I will trust you to pick the metrics that works best.
Let's see. Let me look at storage volume. Right now we have 150 million gallons of storage. We are looking at adding upwards of over 300 million gallons. So we'll be over 500 million gallons of storage in order to accommodate all of the processors that we're proposing. And part of the reason, like I said earlier, for so many processors and so much water is because all of that water has BOD in it. BOD is what creates the methane. The more methane, the more renewable natural gas, the more revenue that comes in. There is an alternative where some of that revenue may be able to come back into the system and help pay off capital expenditures or offset annual operations and maintenance costs.
Okay, so we're talking about a massive growth that we need when we're already at capacity.
Correct.
And it's a wonderful thing to be at capacity on this. I mean, it took us, a little over 20 years, I think, of operation of this to get towards capacity. And massive amount of jobs and opportunity that's brought to the community. So I'm really glad to see we have an opportunity to keep on moving on it. The other question I had was more of a technical one. So my wife's a chemist, so I asked her the questions like, what is BOD? And then she explained in detail what that meant, so I won't reiterate that. But could you talk to me a little bit about what, we're talking about nitrogen removal, we're talking about putting down like an algae or something like that, so we're running this over it, it's utilizing and binding up the nitrogen, right? Are we then like hauling that away? What do we do with that to remove nitrogen? Is it just being disposed of in a landfill? Is it being turned into fertilizer? Like, what happens with that? Because that's not, we're pre-treating it, removing it from the system, but that's not being turned into something that's being sold. Is that correct?
Well, there's a couple of ways that we could do this nitrogen removal. The most well-known process is called denitrification, if I'm getting my chemistry correct. Basically, there is a device that basically blows air into the wastewater and causes chemical reactions that change the nitrogen from nitrogen to nitrate to nitrite to oxygen or something. And so by the time all this air gets into the wastewater, pretty soon nitrogen just goes out of the water, okay? And it just gets converted and then releases itself out of the system. So by the time the water comes out of the system, the water has very little nitrogen in it. Now, you also mentioned algae. Algae is another one of those areas where it can remove nitrogen. We had a study done by a group that suggested that we look at algae as a form of nitrogen removal. We did a little research on that, and we are aware of a company that does an indoor algae greenhouse that we are exploring right now to determine whether there's some feasibility to bring them into this system. And what that system would do is the wastewater would go through their indoor greenhouse, algae would be created, they would then farm that algae, and they sell that algae to chemical companies who then use it to make bioplastics, biofuels, and biofeeds. And so we're exploring that right now. The one issue that we have is the time frame for which we're trying to make these improvements, and that's trying to be done with these improvements by the time Dairy Gold gets started. And so looking at this newer technology with the algae, whether or not it will work with what we got, or we go with the tried and true method of what they call an SBR or a sequencing batch reactor, we're still debating that right now to determine which is the best alternative.
Great. So I think what I took away from that, the most important part I took away from that, we're not talking about creating another solid that we're hauling off. So we're not creating some sort of, concentrated nitrogen byproduct that we're then hauling away. We're
Correct.
either converting into a gas where it's off-gassing, or we're hopefully maybe there's a way of commercializing it as well. Okay, great. That's the only questions I had. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. And I do agree, Councilman Milne. I think it's time for some of our especially our new council members to take a summer trip.
No summer.
No, I'm joking. Thank you for that. So we move forward with item E, resolution bid award Burns Road Pathway Phase 1, 2, 3, and N. Road 93 Powerline Pathway, Director Worley.
Thank you again for this item.
Can we take a quick break? Maybe I'm the only one that needs one. 5 minutes, if possible.
Yeah, 5-minute break.
Thank you. Sorry.
No problem.
Apologies. and it's 9:22 and 30, and we will resume our meeting with Ms. Sarah.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. I am Maria Serra, the Capital Improvement Program Manager for City of Pasco, for short CIP Manager. I am here to present to you a proposed bid award for the construction of Burns Road pathways, phases 1, 2, 3, along with the North Road 93 or Powerline pathway project. We prepare plans and specifications. This project went out to bid, and in December we received 7 bids. The bids were favorable and there were no concerns with the documentation. You may remember that we bid phase 1 of this project in the summer of 2021. And during that bid process, we received 2 bids and they were much higher. And I think it's worth mentioning phase 1 alone could have cost almost as much as phase 1 and phase 2 together right now. Phase 1 and phase 2 in this current bid are our base bid, and we are proposing awarding also the additives, which include phase 3 and the north-south connection. With that, the total bid award is for $558,000, $441.31. And while there is budget to cover the bid award, we would request a budget amendment to include $50,000 additional to this whole set of projects so that we can cover additional costs related to construction management and inspections and have some contingency. And I am happy to answer any questions you may have.
Good evening, Ms. Sarah. Thank you for your presentation. I was curious about the Franklin District Irrigation Canal. Isn't there a place close to 100 in Burns that that they own a piece of that property? And what came of that? Is there an agreement and understanding with that piece of property that they own?
I am not aware of property within the scope of this project, but what they do have is an existing line that is very shallow, and our project scope has the specifications, have some provisions for special care and no rolling, no vibratory rollers in that area, just to prevent any damage to that water line. I think you may be referring to that, but
yes,
okay.
Yes,
okay,
that
good.
is what I'm referring to. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from our council? Okay. We're good to go.
Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we move to item F. And this is in particular to the City Council representation on community boards and committees for 2022 to 2023. I would just reach out to our council members if I do have a draft already and I've discussed with most of you. However, I do want to point out if there's any boards or committees that you feel the council should be part of, just let me know offline. And any other suggestions regarding changes to your current representations, again, just reach me offline, and then that way we can move forward and have it ready to present to staff by as soon as possible. Thank you. And with that, we move forward to item 6, miscellaneous council discussion.
If I may, I'd have something. I was hoping to discuss real quickly before council, and then I'll present a draft if appropriate. We've heard a lot about a local income tax, and a lot of jurisdictions are banning them. And I've thought, quite frankly, this is a lot to do about nothing. As I've looked at in my nerdiness, pre-filed bills. There's Senate Bill 5554, that's 5554. And this actually addresses how offsets must occur in the event that a local income tax is in fact adopted by a jurisdiction. In reviewing some of the court history, without boring everyone, the court actually kind of left the question open as to whether or not these are in fact valid. The Constitution absolutely prohibits it, but the courts are open on it. I would like to bring a resolution prohibiting the city of Pasco from adopting a local income tax. I'd like to know if council's amenable to that. I will draft it and provide it to city staff, as including, of course, legal. If that's the case, I think it would probably be most appropriate in another workshop meeting. But it's something that we've heard a lot about over the past year and a half, 2 years. But as we're seeing more and more, I guess, doors opening to this, I think it's time that the city of Pasco make a decision as to whether or not we want to be the council to decide we're going to stop this for now, and in the event that a future council wants to adopt this, so be it. Let them take the affirmative action to ban our resolution and then amend their own. So I think there's value in letting the residents of Pasco know that we're not interested in a local income tax insofar as this council supports that position. So again, if you all are open to it, I'll work a draft and I'll get it within the next, I think probably the workshop meeting would be next appropriate. If not, then at least we know where we sit.
Thank you for that. And I do want to apologize and take a step back. I skipped City Manager Dave on item F. Do you have any extra comments?
I did have a couple items, Madam Mayor. So wanted to just get a couple of hold of dates out there, February 10th and February 17th for the community listening sessions, the community forums. And those are precursors to Council's March retreat. The February 10th meeting will be at Hapo Center. February 17th will be at Chairperson Recreation Center. So just making you aware of those. And then I wanted, we had a, as I shared with you via email Friday evening and then over the weekend, I know there's a couple emails that went out. We did have our Dock B, which is our older dock, down at the boat basin, break loose Friday night. And through the efforts of the fire department and ACNS, Dan Doda and Zach Ratkai, they were able to bring that thing into a safe position. I do have Director Ratkai online to give us a quick update as to where things are at right now, and then we can chat a little bit more on next steps as well.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, City Council. I did submit some slides. I don't know if I can advance or if I can get the slideshow advanced. I see the mouse work moving around there. All right, let's go one more. So Friday evening, we'd received a call from Columbia Marine Center, who is the lessee of Schlegel Park, and they are in charge of the marina in that area, that the Dock B, which had been closed since late 2018, has broken free from its moorings and moved, essentially, as a whole entire unit. Can we go up one more slide? Friday evening, Dan Doda and the ACS staff, as well as our team of firefighters, helped secure it along the shoreline, as you can see in the upper left photos there. Some of the photos, you can see the gangplank to nowhere, which is typically where you would get in there. And the photo on the lower left is facing from our new Dock A out on the shoreline a little bit. They should be running parallel. And then just a quick overview on the next slide of where it ended up on the map. So you can kind of see Dock B is that one silver one on the right in the middle. The red rectangle is actually where it had moved and it's been secured at this point. So getting a chance to assess the situation on Saturday in the field, and then we have teams looking after it. We will be containing any debris so it doesn't float out into the river and down into McNary Dam. And we are assessing demolition and removal costs right now, as well as any emergency declarations. This could be part of an overall statewide storm that we've been seeing throughout Washington State. So we're working on getting cost estimates to emergency management, working with the Army Corps of Engineers on permitting of demolition of the dock, and seeing what money we can recoup from either state or federal resources through FEMA to rebuild the dock and put it in that area, because we could construe that the windstorm and that we had received on Friday certainly was the catalyst to having it break free. So we're going to spend this week working on emergency permitting and some actions, and we should, would like council council should expect to have items next week with further discussion and further details. And I don't know if there's anything else to add, Dave.
Yeah, the only other thing I'd add, council, is the end of the dock where we'd had some failure before suffered a complete failure as a result of the wind. So there's a lot more damage to that dock than what was there previous to the storm in this event. As Director Ratkai mentioned, we're working with state and federal agencies. We will want a declaration from council next week. That's going to help us in being able to streamline and expedite some of the early work we need to do to get the dock secure, demolished, and removed. So, outside of that, I didn't have any additional items for miscellaneous this evening.
Mr. Zabel, if you don't mind, is Chief Gear available to maybe talk about the COVID numbers and what we're seeing at the testing center and such? I've heard rumor of very long lines and a lot of community interest in that facility and such. I was hoping to get some sort of update.
Yeah, Chief's available while he gets ready to tune in. And Chief, just jump in when you can. I will share with council, we're hitting record numbers on testing. If you've been by there, you've seen it back out onto the street. I think we had between right around 1,360 tests today, which is a record day, followed by a record day just a day or two ago. And so there's been a lot of activity out at the site. We've seen numbers on the Benton Franklin Health District website. Those are the highest numbers we've had since the pandemic. Of course, this is at least reportedly, I don't have all the facts. We have a local decision makers meeting tomorrow. We'll know more. Tomorrow, Mayor's going to be involved in that, as well as myself and some others. But these are the highest numbers we've seen since the pandemic. It's the Omicron variant, which, purportedly is not as, it's far more transmissible, but it's not as severe as maybe some of the earlier variants. But that probably doesn't mean a lot to some of the folks that are getting hauled to the hospital by our paramedics. We've had a pretty steady increase in transports to the hospital over the last couple weeks as a result of this new variant coming to town as well. So very serious situation. Chief, are you on yet?
Yes, I am, Dave.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we got you.
Yep. And actually, the transports have been fairly steady over the last few weeks. They haven't gone up a huge amount like we saw with the Delta. But the numbers are certainly way up in the community. And today they set a record. It was a little over 1,300. I think it was like 1,330, 1,340 for testing at the site. And the test results have slowed way down because of the absolute volume of tests that are coming in, especially from Pierce King and Snohomish County to the UW lab. So that's really slowed down and frustrated a lot of people in getting results back from CBC that are used to getting them in 24 to 48 hours. Now it's taking 3-4 days to get those test results back. The good news, at least in Pasco Fire, is we only have one person out right now with COVID, which is quite different than what we're seeing from fire agencies on the west side that have huge numbers of their staff out that are sick and affecting their ability to respond. So I think overall we're doing okay right now. We'll see. I think we're 2 weeks behind the west side, which is what we've seen all along with the surges, and I think that's what we'll have to just watch for over the next couple of weeks.
Great, thank you, Chief. I did have one follow-up question. There's 2 days during the week in which the testing site is closed. Is that correct?
Yes, they're closed Wednesday, Thursday, but the site in Richland is open on those days. So they alternate the off days for those two sites.
Given the current surge in the community, is there a value in potentially trying to extend through that period of time? Is that something that's an option, or is that just not doable with the staff we have and such?
They're not able to get enough staff to do that. That's even a problem right now, just with 5 days they're open, is not being able to hire enough staff to increase their testing capacity and open up more lanes right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that, Chief. Anybody have any other questions or comments for Chief?
I don't have a comment for the Chief, but I did want to know, are we going to address Mr. Serrano's proposition? Because if we are, I'm for it. And just a quick why I would be is because we're talking about an Amazon facility coming online here real soon, and then, of course, hopefully Costco. So, I mean, I do believe that these two facilities would bring in more money for the city. But what's more concerning to me is that we've talked about the different sales tax that could change, obviously, with the Aquatic Center jumping our tax rate 2% or 0.02, and then the mental health. I know that has been a topic, even though we haven't voted on that. But realistically, you could go from 8.6 to 8.9 within a year, or if it comes along. So I just think that, in my personal opinion, we should show the Pasco residents that we have their back. And we talked about affordable housing. Inflation has gone through the roof in this last year. So I just think it's a great way to show Pasco residents that our city council does at least have their back in some respect. And I mean, probably we're not going to vote for an income tax. I mean, I don't know everybody's political opinion, but I think it shows a good gesture that we do really care about our citizens. And I think it's a good thing that we should move forward and at least say, along with Kennewick and Richland, I think have also done the same thing, saying that we do not want to have an income tax. So that's my 2 cents.
Go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
No, thank you, Mr. Serrano, for bringing this forward. I mean, I think it's been an elephant in the room for a little while as it's been kind of percolating across the state. Personally, I'm not really in support of a resolution on this because it's non-binding. Any future council, including this one, could just change their mind by a simple majority vote of the council. So we can't legally bind a future council in any way, shape, or form. I will absolutely go on the record. I am not in support of an income tax in Pasco. So I can make that statement clearly and loudly on the record right now. I'm just not sure that there's any particular value in a resolution that simply just doesn't actually functionally do anything. It's just as clear as a statement as we can all make. I guess I can't make a statement any more clear than what I just said. I do not support an income tax in Pasco. So that's, I guess, that's my statement, I guess, to the community, as anyone who's listening and interested.
Thank you for that. Any other comments in regards to this particular topic?
I'm kind of with Craig on this one. I feel like if there is a resolution, what value does it add? Is Pete going to be kind of spinning his wheels for essentially a fancy charter? And then again, if the people are going to vote out, let the people speak, as opposed to us, a body, the people speak for us.
Thank you. Okay.
I would just say that it shows peace of mind that, hey, we're not thinking about taxes. I mean, that's, I think, the whole point, and I think that's why Kennewick and Richland both put it out there that the whole council is not wanting to do an income tax. I mean, the Tri-Cities overall is doing very well compared to other communities, and I think it was more of a gesture that, you know, peace of mind, you don't have to worry about this, and that's why we're doing the resolution. I think that's what I got out of it, but maybe somebody else. So if we at least do it, at least it shows peace of mind. That's where I was going with it. I mean, I don't know any council member that's wanting income tax, but it's just for residents to know that we do have their back.
Any further discussion, staff?
So I'll just do this. I've already started drafting it. I'll submit it to the manager. We'll work on getting it in a packet. If someone opposes it, email Dave, say that you don't want it on an agenda. We'll go that route.
Okay. I guess we will go that route. But I'm with Mayor Pro Tem. I think actually all our council could probably say that we do not want an income tax. As how we let our community know and show support, we definitely all have different views on that. But yes, go ahead and submit your draft to staff, to city manager, and then we'll, as a whole, look into it and consider it, and we'll move forward on majority decision. Thank you, I appreciate that. Item number 7, executive session. Do we have a need?
No need this evening.
No need, thank you for that. And item 8, we are done with this second meeting of 2022. Thank you everyone that's watching, that stayed along on this long, and thank you to everyone that showed up at Chambers tonight. With that, have a good evening everyone.